Hello guys, my name is Brian Ganaway. I am a live production specialist in audio, video, and lighting and production coordination. Today I want to share with you some things that weren't covered in the Dante Level 1, 2, and 3 courses. But before I do that, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and also hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our upcoming videos and also some cool interviews that we're going to be having too. So, what they don't tell you in the Dante Level 1, 2, and 3 classes. So, recently I came in to a problem when I was trying to use multiple devices with Dante. So if you guys are unfamiliar with Dante, it is a audio standard protocol, just like you would have had in the past, maybe with Ether Sound or MADI. Basically, those are digital protocols for you to get audio back and forth to multiple devices or from a stage box to your console. Dante is great because you can expand your network to a multitude of devices, and they all don't have to be the same brand, which is great. So I can use Allen&Heath console with a Yamaha console and do a digital mic split, and everything will talk to each other as long as it's in the same sample rate. So if you have a 96K console and a 48K console, then it's not going to work. Or a 96K device and a 48K device, it won't work. So what I came into a problem with was I was planning on using 5 devices, including the console. What was happening was, one, in daisy chain mode, I did not have enough physical inputs for my computers. That was the first problem. The second problem was that because I was sharing so many channels between all of the devices, that I knew that the unicast, where it's point to point, would not work. I needed multicast, which basically says that this device is outputting all these channels. It's here for whoever needs it. So what I needed to do was get a computer that was on stage with 10 channels of stems to the console. And you're probably wondering, well, you could have just used an interface for that. But whenever you're using an interface, that means you need to have physical I/O. And because I only had 2 16 channel stage boxes, that means I would have to chop out a whole bunch of band channels that I could not do. The band was basically 12 channels of drums, kick in, kick out, snare top, bottom, 4 toms, overhead, hi-hat, and some other things, and percussion. And I also had an iPad or MPC. And also I had about 10 channels of vocals and 4 channels of keys and bass and 2 guitars. So right there, that's a lot of channels. That's about 31 channels. So I had 1 spare channel out of all of that. So I couldn't use an interface to get the channels from that computer into the console, but the console was 64 channels, so I knew I had the channel count. And I also had a computer at front of house for playback for iTunes and whatnot. And then I had another computer at front of house handling a multi-track. So I was using the Allen&Heath Avantis console with the Allen&Heath DT168 stage boxes. I seem to really like them. They sound really good for the price point. I will also have a link to those in the description. So those consoles and those devices run at 96K. So that meant that all of my computers at 96K running Dante Virtual Sound Card could only send 32 channels from the computer and receive 32 channels from the console, which was not really a problem because most of the channels that I needed to go on to the multi-track was from the IO boxes. Granted, there were some things on a multi-track recording that we were taking out, like kick out, snare bottom, and some other things, so that there would be room for some other channels. So how I was originally using the console was in the primary port of the Dante card into the stage box, to the stage box number 1 into its primary port, and out of that secondary primary port into the primary port of the second stage box. So from there, I realized I could not plug in all my devices, and 2, because all the channels I was using, I could not use unicast. Unicast is point to point, so I'm sending from this device to this device and nowhere else, which works really well in a small setting. But in this case, I needed multicast because I'm sending channels from one device to multiple. Multicast works a little differently because it's saying that, okay, I have these channels here. It's available for anybody who needs it. So it's great. But in order to do that, you need to have some very, very powerful switches. What I have found that has worked is the Cisco SG300 series switches and also the SG350 switches. They have been really, really great and rock solid. In my case, I do not do the static IP configuration with all of the devices. With my proprietary devices, yes, like my console, my stage boxes, I do set static IPs for, so I can always find them. But I also will, whenever I'm using multiple laptops, I want it to just hand me an IP address. Now, how I do that is I use a firewall. So my firewall is handing out addresses and handling some other things because I'm typically running 2 or more VLANs. Right now in this configuration, it was 3 VLANs. The VLAN number 1 is the management VLAN to get into the switches, the access points. The second VLAN was for console control, so we could use an iPad with the Avantis console to do monitor checks. And the third VLAN was for Dante. The firewall also does not let internet access on VLAN number 1 and VLAN number 3. But when you're on the console control network, you can have internet access as well as control the console, which is great because it would be great not to disconnect your iPad or your computer when working on the console or doing a firmware update. So what I had originally did with this setup, I had the console primary port into a switch that was at front of house, and the stage boxes plugged into each other, like in the link mode, and then into the switch. Then the computers were in in the stage switch and in the front of house switch. I'm going to show you a diagram of how this was laid out. So in the blue boxes, you'll notice that there are two switches, the front of house switch and the stage switch. The stage switch is the core switch. So basically the firewall connects there. And then it goes into the trunk port of the stage switch, and then there's another cable from that trunk port that's going into the front of house switch. That's basically how all the VLANs communicate with each other via one cable. It's really great, really robust. You can either use a Cat5e or better, or a fiber SFP in the fiber slots, but you need to make sure that those ports are matching in configuration. So what I had noticed when I had originally plugged this setup in, that I could not get control of the stage boxes and I could not get audio to pass. So you would think that in the Dante level 1 and 2 and 3 tell you about how this does not work. I'm going to tell you why that did not work. The first reason was multicast, and the second reason was each device has to be separate when you're using multicast in this fashion. And also there were some other configuration things that I needed to do. So when you do a configuration like this, it is very important that every Dante device gets plugged into a port in the switch. Now, the reason why that is important is because if they're linked together, multicast will be blocked, which in our case, that means audio is stopped. There's no audio, there's no clock data, and there's basically like nothing there to grab. Like, you'll see the devices, but you'll notice in Dante controller in the device tab, everything's red. So the best solution is the primary port needs to go into a port on the switch. So in our case, stage box number 1 on the stage switch went into port number 9. The stage box number 2 went into port number 10, and the laptop went into port number 11 on the stage switch. And then on the front of house switch, we had the Dante card in port number 9, and the computer 1 in port number 10, and computer 2 in port number 11. The reason why I used those ports were what I had assigned to that VLAN, and they were set for multicast. So that is a very important thing that you want to make sure you do. If you don't, you won't have audio passing, and you'll be looking at it for a very long time trying to figure out why the traffic wasn't passing. The other portion of this, there were a lot of clicking and a lot of basically audio being engaged. Like, you were hearing kind of like in the old analog days, like whenever you turn the console off before you turn the amps off, like a big boom sound. It wasn't as bad as that, but it was like a type of sound. So it would keep happening over and over and over and over and over again. So what that problem was when you're using the Allen&Heath Avantis, the card has to be set to a preferred master and an external clock. So doing that, that's essential to making sure you can have audio passing. From there, there's also a couple things that you want to make sure you know. If you were using a 96K device, and you were using Dante Virtual Sound Card, they all need to be set to 96K. Now, whenever you use 96K on Dante Virtual Sound Card, it takes it from 64 channels by 64 channels to 32 by 32. The reason why it does that is because your network card and your computer can only handle so much traffic. So here's how you get around this. Yamaha and Focusrite make a Dante PCIe card. Now you're probably wondering, okay, I have this PCIe card. Well, I'm using a laptop. How do I plug that in? Or I'm using an iMac. How do I plug that in? You can use a Sonnet PCIe Echo 3. And it has I believe it has a full lane in it, so you can use your Focusrite cards and plug it in via Thunderbolt. It's really great. Now you can go up to a 192K on those Dante PCIe cards and not have to deal with any of the channel loss. The reason why is Dante Audinate, who makes Dante, uses a card called a Brooklyn card. It's red and it has Dante on it. If you ever are using a console and you pull out your Dante card, I can guarantee you on the top of it, you're going to notice that there's this little red card in it. That is the brain of Dante. And that card can process audio and video. But for right now, a lot of manufacturers are just using audio, but some are starting to integrate video on it too. But that card enables you to change sample rates without losing channel count. So if you have advanced Dante setup, I highly suggest making sure you have what they call an accelerator card from either Focusrite or Yamaha, so that you can record up to 144 channels bidirectional. So if you have a high channel count at 96K, you can capture all of that. In my case, I did not have that, so I had to sacrifice some channels for the multi-track recording. But I hope this information helped you navigate some issues you may have with Dante. Make sure whenever you're using Dante in a complex setup, you are using switches that are configured correctly for multicast. You can find the switch configuration on the Audinate website. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to comment and I will do my best to help you answer them. Also, if there's any videos that you would like to see covering more topics like Dante, please share them as well. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can see all of our upcoming content. Have a great day.